Hey, I'm Deanna. Welcome to my channel. A friend gave us these plastic chairs, and while I do love a good pop of color, I'm just not really feeling this teal. So my plan is to transform them into a reclaimed wood look, like something you might see at Restoration Hardware or Pottery Barn. I'll be using Fusion mineral paint, no primer needed, because yes, it adheres to plastic and it's good for outdoors. So come along with me and let's get this makeover started. I'll start this project by giving these chairs a deep cleaning. I'm going to be using TSP mixed in with some warm water, and I'll do about a 10-to-1 ratio. That's 10 parts water to 1 part of the TSP granules. Stir thoroughly until all of the TSP dissolves in the warm water. Why I like to use this cleaner is because it cuts through grease, grime, mildew, and mold, and it even dulls the plastic finish a little bit, which will help with paint adhesion. I like to put on a pair of gloves to protect my hands, and I'll be using this kitchen sponge here to scrub down the chairs. Dip it into the TSP, squeeze out the excess, and then just get to work scrubbing down the furniture. Now that I've finished scrubbing both chairs with the TSP, I'm going to wipe them both down one more time, just using some clean, warm water, and this will remove any of the TSP residue that's left on the surface. As your water starts to look a little cloudy, just swap it out for some fresh, warm water. I'm just going to leave these chairs to sit and air dry before I move on to the next step. The final prep step is to lightly sand the entire surface of the chairs. This will give a little bit more texture to the plastic and help the paint to grab on better. This will be especially important on the back side of the chair where the plastic is quite smooth and shiny. The front of the chairs already had a bit of texture. Come take a closer look. You can see the subtle faux wood grain texture here on these pieces. So when I'm sanding or painting, I'm going to be sure to follow the same direction in case my sanding marks or brush strokes show through the layers of paint. I'm going to be using 180 grit sandpaper, and I've got it wrapped around a sanding block here, but I've also got some sheets that I can easily fold to get in all the nooks and crannies. And once you're all done with sanding, just take a damp cloth and wipe one more time to remove any fine little bits of plastic sanding dust. I recently read a blog post on Fusion's website where they painted plastic chairs just like these, and I was inspired to give it a try. This will be my first time using Fusion mineral paint on plastic, but I have painted chairs like these in the past using chalk paint by Annie Sloan. That product worked great. The main difference is Fusion mineral paint has a top coat built into the formula. So once we're done with painting, unlike chalk paint, we don't need to put a sealer on to protect the surface. This is great news because it saves us time and money. So let's get to painting. I'm going to start with a base coat in the color Woodwick. It's a medium gray-brown tone. There are a lot of tight little areas and random shapes, so I'm just going to grab a variety of brushes. Whenever I'm painting a chair, I always flip it upside down and start with the bottom first, getting all the hard to reach areas. Then I'll flip it over and work on the top and the easy to reach parts. I like to pour my paint out into another container so I'm not dipping my brush in and contaminating the paint. I'm getting started with this tiny little brush and working to get in all these tight little spaces. I'm going for fairly solid coverage, but just watching for pools and runs. I just flipped the chair over and I noticed there's a few runs dripping through from the other side. So while those are still wet, we're just going to brush them out. Now that I've got the chair flipped over and I'm painting on the front side, I'm being a lot more careful about the direction of my brush strokes. I want to intentionally brush on with that faux wood grain in nice long linear strokes. You can see this paint goes on very nice and smooth and has really good coverage on this textured side of the plastic. But I actually don't mind if there's a little bit of texture created from the brush strokes because that will help to enhance the faux wood grain look that I'm working to create. I'm going to continue painting until all of this teal color is covered, and then I'm going to let it sit and fully dry before moving on to the next step. It's recommended to let this paint sit for a couple of hours before moving on to a second coat. It took about an hour and a half per chair to complete one coat of paint. You can see little bits of blue peeking through. So if you were going for just one solid color, you'd apply your second coat of paint now, let it dry, and your project would be finished. Pretty quick and easy. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, I want to create more of a reclaimed wood look. So I'm going to grab a few more colors of paint and then start to add on some additional layers. These plastic chairs already have a faux wood grain molded in, so I'm going to start by doing a bit of experimenting and see if I can make that texture pop. I'll be using some Fusion mineral paint, again in the color Woodwick, and I'll also be pouring out a little bit of this raw silk color, which is a warm, creamy white. I'm going to start with a test patch in an inconspicuous area. What I'll do is I'll brush on a little bit of the paint and then wipe it back right away with a soft cotton rag and just see how that looks. I'm going to be using a combination of the raw silk and the Woodwick, and I don't mind if the two mix together a little bit because there's always going to be variation in natural wood tones. For this, I'll be using a chip brush. You can get them at your hardware store. I like these because of the nice stiff natural bristles and the jagged ends, which really help to create some texture. I've also got a soft cotton t-shirt rag here. So just start by dipping the tips of my bristles into the white, get a little on there, maybe a little brown, and just sort of let them mix together on the tray. And then I'm just going to do this little section here, brush some on. And then right away, using this soft cotton rag, I'm just going to wipe that area and see how it looks. I can see that the white paint did help that faux wood grain to pop out, but I think it's a little lighter than what I had in mind, and I did want it a little bit more textured. So I'm going to pull out one of my favorites, the wood graining tool, and just experiment a little bit with that and see how that looks on the surface. I've got a wood grain tool and a stiff bristled scrubby brush. Both of these are great for creating faux wood looks and adding texture. So let's play around a little bit and see what I can come up with. The wood grain tool has a few key parts. It's got these half circles which can create knots and rings, as well as these little teeth on the edge to help create different types of graining. Let's try it on the arm of the chair to start. Begin by loading a bit of paint on your brush. And again, I'm using sort of a mix of the white and the gray. You don't have to paint it on too thick, but you do want to try and cover an entire section at a time. Because natural wood always has variation, I like to use a combination of colors to create a little bit of depth and dimension. Hold the wood grain tool between your pointer finger and your thumb. And then drag towards you. As you rock and move it back and forth, you create different grain and knot patterns. That turned out pretty good. Now I'm going to use one of these combs here on the edge just to fill in this space where the wood grain tool wasn't quite wide enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, because remember, wood grain is naturally imperfect. Now this pattern is looking pretty bold, so I think I will do another layer over top of paint after to soften it all, but I do love this texture that it's creating, so I'm going to keep playing around. If the wood grain tool starts to get a buildup of paint, you can just take it to the sink and rinse. If you don't have a sink handy, I just use a damp paper towel and just kind of wipe off some of the excess. And this will keep the grain nice and prominent. I'm just going to continue to work section by section, just like I did on the arm. And I'm going to remember to follow the direction of the wood grain, how the chair was constructed, and I'll share a few more tips with you along the way. The wood grain tool works best on flat areas and areas that are a little bit wider. So we're going to try that here again. Drag. And so you can see where the plastic rounds a little bit. The wood grain tool doesn't quite follow through, but that's okay. That's where you've got the combs to get in there. So don't stress too much and just have fun. I'm going to try the stiff bristle brush in this little area. It's created some really subtle texture, which I don't mind. So this would be a good tool for kind of blending or softening any areas that come out a little too bold. I like that. Let's add a little bit more definition with our comb. And then the brush can just soften it and break it up a bit, helping it to be a little bit more natural. Another tip I have is to avoid repetitive patterns. The biggest mistake I see when people are new to the wood grain tool is just creating the same patterns over and over again. So you end up with a knot, 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 and it just looks really forced and unnatural. So maybe on this one, I'll do a couple of knots. On this piece, I'll focus on using the combs or the bristles of the stiff brush and just create some real variation. If you're not sure what to do, take a moment to look at some real wood furniture online, even just photos, and kind of see how varied the pattern of wood actually is, and that will give you some inspiration. And I just want to remind you that I am going to do one more layer over top to help soften the boldness of this wood grain pattern. So if it's looking a little bold right now, just trust the process and we'll eventually get there, creating that nice reclaimed wood look that I'm after. And don't stress, if you do a section and you're not happy with the result, while it's still wet, just take your brush, feather it out, and try again. Even just dry brushing with the jagged tips of the bristles really does help to create the illusion of wood grain. So if you don't have a wood grain tool and you just have a couple of these chip brushes, you can play around with that to create this driftwood look on its own. The plastic on the back of the chair is much smoother than the faux wood grain textured front. And while sanding did help with paint adhesion, you can still see quite a bit of blue. So my main objective with this coat is to cover all of the blue so none is showing through. My wood grain tool is a little bit too wide for these slats, so I'm going to focus on using my chip brush and to dry brush on the two colors, the wood wick and the warm white color, to cover the blue and to create the illusion of that faux wood. So everything will be nice and linear following the construction of the chair. I'm going to get a little bit of paint on the bristles and then just start by working it into all the nooks and crannies to make sure that teal blue is covered. Kind of just working one or two sections at a time. I continue to mix the colors to create variation like natural wood would have. And then once I've got the blue covered in that section, I'll just get a little on the tips and lightly dry brush it. Again, following the direction that the wood grain would go. Doesn't have to be perfect. There can be lots of variation. And again, we can do another layer on top after if we want to soften or blend anything. But the main objective on this layer is just to make sure that all the teal blue is covered. And we're starting to give a bit of a faux wood grain look. The front and the back of the chair are going to look a little different simply because of the two different types of textures of plastic. And I'll probably have this side up against a wall so you won't really see it anyways, but I want to do my best to help both sides of the chair blend so it feels like a cohesive chair. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this wood grain is turning out. I've decided I'm going to try to add one more layer just to soften some of these wood grain tool marks so it's less cartoony and a little bit more subtle. Now, if this were an indoor piece of furniture, I might take a glaze or stain and rub it on top to stain the paint. But because this is an outdoor piece of furniture, I'm going to continue to use Fusion Mineral Paint, and I'm going to use it at full strength. I don't want to dilute it with any water because I'm not sure if that will mess with the makeup of the paint, making it less weather resistant. So I've got a couple of ideas in mind. I'm going to take a few colors, put them in my tray, just rub on with a soft cotton rag and wipe back like you would a stain. And I might add a little bit of dry brushing on top. So let's just get started and see how it goes. I think I'll start with a hidden area, one of these legs from the back, just to get my technique down. I'm going to take a little bit of the brown on my rag and just wipe it into the surface. Just see that it tones the wood down just a little bit. And maybe a little bit of white mixed in. Again, variation is key here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Just overall softens that wood grain look. Let me give you a closer look at what I'm trying. I've got both the gray, brown, and the white in my tray. I'm just using a soft cotton t-shirt rag, and I get a little bit on the rag here, and then working again with the wood grain in the way that the chair would be constructed. I'm just rubbing it onto the surface. And see how it's just like warming up the color and softening, just like a stain would do on raw wood. Yeah, that's looking really good to me. I'm going to keep going and mixing up the colors just a little bit, again, to create a bit of variation. Wrap the t-shirt rag around your brush to get any little tight spaces. dip a little paint on your rag and scrub it in. That works great. On their blog, Fusion Mineral Paint gives some tips for painting outdoor furniture, specifically plastic. And some of the key things to note are that the paint is waterproof and it's made from mineral pigments, so the colors will last a very long time without fading outdoors. This durable paint is great for spring, summer, fall outdoors, but if you live in a climate with snowy winters like I do, they recommend bringing your painted furniture indoors over winter. It's a great way to bring new life to old furniture that might otherwise end up in the landfill. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't tested this particular paint outside for a full season, but I will give you an update at the end of summer. So remember to subscribe and click the notification bell so you're alerted when I do post that real life update. I'm going to continue working section by section, rubbing in another layer of paint, and when I'm all finished, I'll show you the final look. Let's take a look at the transformation. Here's a reminder of what the chairs looked like before. They went from bright teal to a reclaimed wood look. The chairs now have a softer, more natural feel. It's just what I was looking for. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the finished look? And do you have any questions about the process? And the best part, this technique isn't just for plastic. You can use it on all kinds of surfaces, dressers, tables, really whatever you've got. So before you toss something out, remember, if you don't love the color, you can always paint it. Let's keep furniture out of the landfill and give it new life instead. So if you've got some old furniture, don't toss it, transform it. It's such a fun and easy way to upgrade your space. If you enjoyed this makeover, don't forget to like and share with a friend who loves a good transformation. And if you give this faux wood grain finish a try, remember to tag me on Instagram at DIYDeanna. I'd love to see what you create. Subscribe to my channel for more creative DIYs and furniture flips. And don't forget, I'll be posting an update at the end of summer to let you know how these chairs are holding up. So click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you'll be alerted when I post that update. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you back here in the next one.